Warning: this area was a highly guarded military facility. Unauthorized entry was strictly prohibited. Any approach to this area was subject to fire. Commander. Even in the river near this place, the fish hardly bit. It was impossible to catch even a small fry, but there were plenty of toads. It seems that the main character has wasted his time today too. The main character is Kang Dae-oh, a 32-year-old unemployed bum. On the banks of this river, he was not the only one who liked to spend his time, but now those people opposite him seemed to be getting a bite. Kang Dae-oh watched them closely. Those people didn't know which direction to fish. It seemed like a chairman was resting there, and he ordered everyone to move aside. One of those people did notice Kang Dae-oh. They weren't acquainted, so there shouldn't be any problems. But still, this man decided to ask what he was doing there. This was their place, and they don't tolerate strangers. Kang Dae-oh tried to ignore his words. This behavior only angered the man. He was already going to beat up the main character so that he would finally come to his senses. Kang Dae-oh wasn't a weakling, so he didn't need much to protect himself. He considered these people to be bandits, so a fight was inevitable. The man who had spoken to him so disrespectfully now got what he deserved. But the rest of the people were very shocked. They did not know who this strong person was who had crossed their path. Well, they weren't going to stand aside either. Did Kang Dae-oh know who these people really were? The main character had no idea who they really were, because it didn't matter to him. These people dared to waste all of Kang Dae-oh's time. They should spit out all of his flesh. His cries could be heard all the way to the other side of the river. There were other people there who apparently just wanted to relax in peace and quiet. It was an elderly man, and he was surprised that even in such a place people found a reason to shout and fight. Meanwhile, Kang Dae-oh had already scattered all the bandits to the sides. Having finished, the main character noticed that these people had managed to catch a big catch, or that they were the ones who caught it. Seeing the old man who had already managed to come closer, Kang Dae-oh wondered if by chance these people were his subordinates. It must have been that same manager. This man was not alone, and after the main character's words he was attacked. The second man was clearly not pleased with his tone and the fact that he dared to address such an important person. The man who attacked him was named Choi Cheol-gi, the head of the security team of Taejin Group. Naturally, Kang Dae-oh didn't know who these people were, but it was clear that they were quite strong. The main character was not going to tolerate such treatment either, so he responded to Choi Cheol-gi with a blow for a blow. All these people were just a warm-up for a physique like the main characters. The old man even managed to take off his hat as Kang Dae-oh approached. Was he really going to fight him too? Their forces would clearly be unequal. The main character couldn't allow himself to do that. But instead of responding to a fight with a fight, this man decided to simply calmly and politely address him. The old man suggested having a drink together and resolving this whole conflict peacefully. And this old man knew how to start a conversation correctly. Without thinking twice, he agreed to have a drink with him. It was almost evening. Kang Dae-oh always liked to spend some of his evenings in this place, but now he was not alone there. In parallel with this, the people he had beaten up earlier had already managed to come to their senses, wash their things, and come to terms with the fact that they had yielded in strength to just one guy. The main character, for all this time, has not yet been able to see the bottom of this bottle of expensive cognac. Instead, he laughed a lot and slowly became drunk, praising such a fantastic drink. From what Kang Dae-oh had already managed to tell the man, he concluded that his interlocutor had been a fighter for almost half of his entire life. Now he had no home, no beloved, no money. He just rented a room and wasted his time on small jobs. The protagonist noticed that the old man had been listening to him very attentively all this time and analyzing everything he had said. He had masterfully managed to destroy him with the truth. The man said that if he had such power, he could easily find a good place for himself in any organization. But Kang Dae-oh himself replied that the old man simply did not know what he was talking about. The time has passed when bandits did whatever they wanted, relying only on their strength. People with money and power support each other and do absolutely everything. Therefore, people like him, born with nothing in this world, were not allowed to even dream. Even though he didn't want to live like this, he couldn't do anything about it. As a child, Kang Dae-oh believed that he could do anything with just his strength. He believed that if he smashed everything that stood in his way, he would one day rise high. But that was impossible for him. The top spots in this world of fists were always occupied by people with power and money. These old guys could always trample guys with desire and aspiration, like himself. But even despite this truth, the protagonist always continued to want to succeed. He wanted the whole world to know his name. If he had such a chance, even just once, he would have been able to take this whole country into his own hands. The old man noted that it was a very interesting speech. The man was not surprised that there were people who could have achieved something worthwhile, but due to certain circumstances they could not. The man knew that the chance would definitely fall to those who deserved it. But was this guy sure that even if he got this chance, he wouldn't be able to lose to someone? Kang Deo was sure that he could handle it, because this was his dream and his main goal in life. The man really liked such a truthful answer, but it was time for him to go. The experienced and newcomers were already waiting for him. Finally, the man asked the guy to repeat his name. The main character asked to never forget him again. Strong, big and proud, Kang Deo. He had a very sonorous name. Standing up, the man decided to tell him that such old stuff from Taijin Group would soon open a grand festival for people like this strong guy. The man thought that he should try himself and his strength. As the guy said before, he doesn't have a job, so he has plenty of time. Kang Deo happily agreed, and they shook hands as a sign of agreement that the guy would definitely come there. Still, the main character believed that he was not worthy of being called personally by the people from the top. This was a chance to conquer the world with 2 fists. Kang Deo didn't know who was in front of him, and didn't immediately understand the man's words. It didn't matter, he was grateful for these words and the offer. Kang Deo said that he enjoyed spending time with the man, and wished him a long and healthy life. As he was leaving, the man asked Choi Cheol-gi to send an invitation to the boy. Cheol-gi was not happy with this turn of events. He clearly didn't like this guy, and his boss knew it. However, what was interesting was that this guy was really strong. He dealt Cheol-gi a very strong blow, which made him look gloomy now. In that case, there was no need for more precise demands. They caught a really big fish in a rather unexpected place. Today's fishing was a success for everyone. After his rest, the men went to their people. He cared how they spent their time. His people always had to be well. He never forgot to take care of them. This man's name was Jin Yong-won. His status was that of the chairman of the largest organization in the shadow world of South Korea, Taijin Group. Born with the aspiration that everyone dreams of, it is to conquer the world with your enormous strength. Over time, he prepared everything for the sake of animals like himself, who are eager to trample the losers and rise to the top through sheer strength and enormous self-belief. At one time, this man was simply obsessed with all the strongest in this world. Jin Young-yi swore that he would leave something behind. It would be the best gift. Invitation. The previous government waged war on the various criminal elements of this country, which it lost in a big way. South Korea after. This war was called the Fists of the Warring States of Spring and Autumn. At that time, several powers competed for dominance, and the man who brought agony to these monsters called himself the King of Beasts. It was young Jin Young-yi, then still called Taijin. So it would not be an exaggeration to say that it was only thanks to him that order was established in the shadow world of this country. And now that he is dead, these shadow beasts will crawl out into the sunlight again. After this warning, an emergency council was called. It was inevitable that the beasts would start a war again. Kim Joo-ok is a senior superintendent of the National Police Agency's Metropolitan Investigation Division. He investigated the case, but there was so little evidence that it was difficult to even approximately understand whether this was a simple death. And now at the council, they were discussing the idea of putting every single one of these beasts to sleep. This had to be done immediately. Even if they had to ask for help from the Justice Department and National Intelligence, they had to try to do it. But the main problem was that if they carried out this plan, it would later cause great unrest throughout the country. Many people thought that this was the best opportunity to remove the animals, the best time to truly secure the country, and someone believed that by stirring up the hive, they were bringing on even more terrible troubles. This fundamentally violates public welfare. In that case, special measures were needed. Commissioner General Han Young-shik is the Commissioner General of the National Police Agency of South Korea. 40 years ago, Han Young-shik is the commander of the Dongdaemun Mobile Task Force in Seoul. That day, many died under his command in a huge fire, and many died even earlier at the hands of animals. They were indeed a huge problem at the time and remain so today. There were people who managed to survive, but almost all of them faced a terrible reckoning. That day, the general clearly understood many things. You had to get out of the way because no matter who he was or who he would become, even if he was a policeman, you couldn't escape that field of knives in front of you. And then he appeared. Jin Young-yi then promised that he would take care of everything himself. He was still connected with the Taijin Group back then. He was the chairman of this nationwide organization, and he was able to keep his word. In the future, the man who will be called the top of the world has unfathomable power. He was a leader then, and even after so many years he remains one forever. Now his place has been temporarily taken by Han Young-shik. He was no worse, he just didn't know what kindness and understanding were. He was a strong and strict general. But only one thing has always remained constant. His goal is the safety of the people. Han Young-shik didn't understand how those who were the pillars of support and who protected the citizens could be so weak in the face of the real enemy. No one should ever forget their duty. They are the police. For them, the main priority should always remain the safety of ordinary citizens. Eradicating evil won't prevent the birth of a second Jin Yon Yi. It's like burning down a straw house in pursuit of fleas. Has no one ever thought so? As long as there is light in the world, there will be darkness. Han Young-shik knew what he was talking about and what they were all planning to do. War was not the answer. He had long ago decided that these animals should live in the shadows on their own, and those who came out would face the guillotine. That's all the police do. South Korea's National Police Agency launches Plan B to combat violent crime. Everyone else was obliged to support this decision. Finally, all the issues were settled and the meeting was over. It was time to have a smoke. As the pinnacle of the shadow world, Jin Young Yi lived a bold life. General Han Young-shik constantly thought that even though he had not taken the path of darkness, it was impossible not to recognize his abilities. A man like him had to organize everything until his death. No one knew what gift he could leave to the world. Han Young-shik, as a man, could not bear it so much that his blood simply boiled in his veins. Now after his death, someone has to lead his people. The very center of the Gangnam area, the city of Seoul. Many people gathered for Jin Young Yi's funeral. Everyone was eager to honor his bright and courageous memory. Each of his men placed one flower on the altar and then knelt down. In parallel with this, another pavilion. A man entered the door of the room who wanted to report something to his elders. He said that a lot of mourners came to the altar. This room was full of cones from the top. It must be Jin Young's death, and it was their doing. When their man arrived with the news, one of these people concluded that it was time. There really were a lot of mourners and relatives gathered. It's time for fiery speeches. It was the exit of a man named Sa Song. He was the closest person to the deceased chairman Jin Young Yi, vice chairman of Taijin Group / First of all, he would like to express his sincere gratitude on behalf of Taijin to all those who came to offer their condolences. Chairman Jin Young Yi, who is lying underground, would have liked this picture very much. The answer to the question he left during his lifetime, what is power? Many people believe that strength is blood ties, status. Power is belonging to something very worthy of attention. It is origin. But all this is not it. It is entirely pretense. Sasong knew that the main definition of this word was not actually hidden from view. It was all too simple. The strong is not the one who wins, but the winner is the strong. And everything else was unimportant. Faith in yourself and respect for your opponent, that's true strength. To lose and accept defeat, that's strength. The winner is the strong one. Strength is in the desire to win and nothing more. Here is the answer to this important question. It is worth defeating your opponent who stands before you fairly, and it is worth capturing those who are lagging behind. It's worth trying to achieve everything. It's worth trying to become the new master and get everything. Many standing there dreamed of reaching the top. Now they have a responsibility to preserve the legacy of the late chairman Jin Young Yi. On this day, the bet was to be made on the next one after him, the bet on the air. This festival would be for the people, the proclamation of the champion. People were happy with this turn of events. Meanwhile, somewhere in the slums, who would have thought that the stew would take an hour to be delivered? This is the best Chinese cafe in the city. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. Someone was trying very hard to break in. Could this really be the courier who carried Tianmen sauce across the Great Wall of China? It was Kang Dao's apartment, and Choi Chul-gi came to him. Chul-gi came to him with a very important matter. In his hand was an envelope with an invitation to that very warrior festival. So much time has passed, not so much, but Kang Dao, to be honest, had already managed to forget a little about it. His neighborhood was surprisingly very quiet all the time. Kang Dao needed a little time to get ready. Rules for participation in the festival. Anyone and in any way. If a person arrives at the destination with an invitation, then he is allowed to participate. 10 minutes later, a special bus arrived for the main character. The doors opened and it seemed that there would be no one there except him. But before entering, he noticed a man there who invited him to go inside. Before going in, the guy decided to finish smoking. Kang Dao noticed that the man had no manners at all. As soon as he entered inside, he felt a strange iron smell, and then he felt something strange under his feet. Looking down at his feet, he was not at all scared, but instead decided to turn his head. There were corpses all over the cabin. Now it was clear where the smell and bloodstains were coming from. He noticed that there was a man sitting at the end of the corridor. It seemed he was alive. This man was not at all friendly, and his gaze was completely cold and unfriendly. But Kang Dae-oh wasn't a weakling either. He wouldn't tolerate such disrespect. The driver knew that the festival had started on this bus, so he knew that this guy would suffer the same fate as the others. The main character was not at all prepared for such a turn of events, but he was not going to give up, even though he did not quite understand what actually happened on that bus. While he was trying to figure it out, that man had already rushed towards him at full speed and even dared to put a knife to his face. Kang Dae-oh responded to the gesture with the same serve. It was not a weak blow, but it failed to kill the man, and he began to attack again. It was impossible not to notice that he wielded his weapon masterfully. For such cases, the main character also had a couple of tricks for his victory. First, you had to let the enemy get closer to you, and then deliver a powerful blow. Meanwhile, the bus continued its journey. The driver's task was to bring one of them, the clear winner. Their bus was the last one, so they had to prepare to meet the candidates. Choi Chul-gi knew that there was a very dangerous bandit riding there, and it was unlikely that anyone there could survive after meeting him. The last person to board the bus, according to his information, was him, a monster from a ruthless gang, living in Kwesan County, Cheongbuk Province. His name is Chae Soo-hyuk. No one could have imagined that even he would be able to get an invitation. He would definitely be able to become an influential figure at the festival. The bus had almost arrived at the drop-off point for all passengers. Who would have thought that a real surprise awaits them inside? Before we even had time to stop, someone had already flown out of the bus, knocking out the front window. Everyone who saw it was more than just shocked, but Choi Chul-gi had an idea of what exactly might have happened there. Surprisingly, all bets were on Chae Soo-hyuk to win, but it looks like someone has emerged who is several times stronger than him. The man standing near the exit of the bus couldn't even move until someone got out of it and pushed him, telling him to get away. Kang Dae-oh greeted Chil-gi and informed him that he had kept his promise to come to this festival. At least he shouldn't have been late. The protagonist decided to give his invitation now, which meant that he would take part. Only now his hands were all covered in blood and his shirt was a little wrinkled. All that was left was to slightly improve his appearance, and Kang Dae-oh was ready for the holiday. He quickly found the main gate, and without hesitating for long, he entered them. But what was his surprise that there were too many like himself, strong and proud fighters who wanted to win. But this could not frighten the main character. He was too confident in his strength. The only thing he said was that his opponents looked great. At least he would have to fight with equals in strength. As it actually happened, 15 minutes before the last bus arrived, Kang Dae-oh and Chae Soo-hyuk were heading towards Ilal Mountain. Their fight was in full swing. The forces were already equal, and this seemed interesting to Kang Dae-oh. The monster tried to swing his weapon at the main character, but as it turned out, his reaction was quite lame. It was easy as pie to knock the weapon out of his hands. Excellent speed, but even that was not enough to make the enemy change his mind. That wasn't all. Chae Soo-hyuk wasn't a fool to carry only one knife in his pocket, and now he attacked again. And again they met in a duel. The monster managed to cut the main character. His blade was too sharp. But he didn't strike. He only cut Kang Dae-oh's only suit. This made him angry. And from that moment on, patience ran out and it was time to get serious. It's surprising that someone was found who was the first to strike at such a moment. Chae Soo-hyuk didn't know him before. He can hardly forget him now. He was an amateur without any family ties. He couldn't even find a single careless loophole in Kang Dae-oh's movements. Was that really all he was capable of? Seeing how Chae Soo-hyuk started, the protagonist thought that he really had some talent, but it turned out that he was able to fall from one heavy blow. Kang Dae-oh felt sick at his pompous, pathetic appearance. He considered his opponent a real coward. But with Chae Soo-hyuk's lifestyle, he simply couldn't be a coward, and even now he refused to give in. He promised that he would be able to tear his opponent to pieces. He was indeed very strong, but he clearly couldn't stand up to Kang Dae-oh in this battle. Seeing that his opponent was unwilling to admit defeat, Kang Dae-oh was glad that now he would at least see something interesting. The protagonist allowed the enemy to attack first in order to give him at least some hope of victory. But something happened that neither Chae Soo-hyuk nor Kang Dae-oh expected. It was a real force majeure, a change in the environment, and it happened because of a sharp turn. It was in the decaying center. Thanks to his exceptional sense of balance, Kang Dae-oh was able to grab the handrail. And then he turned the critical moment into his victory. It was a clear loss for Chae Soo-hyuk. Kang Dae-oh believed that his opponent could not have escaped from him so easily. He hit him a few more times before trying to stop. It was worth remembering that there was a bus driver sitting in front who, in the horror of what he saw, forgot to look at the road. The bus driver had never seen Kang Dae-oh before and had no idea where the guy even came from. Having finished, the main character announced that he was looking forward to the beginning of this festival. And now when the door in front of him was open, he boldly walked inside, remembering his path to all this. Many people didn't know him, and they all thought that Chae Soo-hyuk would arrive on the last bus. Kang Dae-oh noticed many eyes on him and decided to address everyone with words about how he heard that people who wanted to measure their fists had gathered in this place, and he ran there with high expectations, but only weaklings turned up there. The main character wanted to anger them to see who would dare to fight him. Some of these people did get angry. The first to try to attack him was some fat stranger who clearly didn't have enough strength to participate in this festival. But this man didn't even have time to run, as someone else blocked his path and, what's more, even managed to hit him, thereby knocking him down. Turning around, the man dared to ask who dared to disturb him. This was a man much taller and stronger than himself, and his appearance alone could inspire fear. This man's name was Hwang Tae-seop. He was the boss of an organization in Busan, the Paektu Gang. His gaze was menacing and clearly did not promise anything good, so the man he hit did not dare say anything in response. He just quickly stood up and ran away screaming. Kang Dae-oh was right. Most of the people gathered in this place were weaklings and cowards. Hwang Tae-seop would never stand up for anyone in this place, but fortunately he had long thought about relaxing his hands a little before the game, but this weakling was clearly not worth it. The boss of the organization addressed the main character in such a way that it seemed to him that he did not understand anything at all about this world. You couldn't just walk away from this place because your legs were shaking. In that case, it wasn't worth wasting your life. When you come to this place, you should think about your parents who raised you all your life. Therefore, you should not commit rash acts and go back to where you came from. Hwang Tae-seop thought that Kang Dae-oh was just a boy, so he asked him to go home, saying that he clearly had no business being at this festival. The main character clearly wasn't going to listen to him, even though this man had achieved a lot in his life and clearly knew what he was talking about. His advice could be valuable, but not in this place and not for someone who had already arrived. Hwang Tae-seop shouldn't have said anything about his parents. Those words could easily make the guy lose his temper. Kang Dae-oh suggested placing Hwang Tae-seop's head on the funeral table. After these words, the boss of the organization already regretted that he had even approached this crazy boy. He tried to swing at it, but someone suddenly jerked his hand. The man was as big as he was, and no one knew what he was capable of, so Hwang Tae-seop decided not to move for now. The people who were with him already looked exactly like the people from Taijin. This man's name was Ko-un. His team of people were special enforcers directly reporting to the chairman of Taijin Group. After Hwang Tae-seop recognized these people, he decided to pull out his hand after all. Finally, he said that he wanted Kang Dae-oh to survive and fight with him. He wanted to kill this boy with his own hands, and Kang Dae-oh was not against meeting him again. Kang Dae-oh still thought that this place would be a place where fun would be in full swing. He even tried to have some fun with Ko-woong. It turned out that this place was not just a gathering place for some scum, but also for many famous people from the shadow world. This was the first time that Choi Chul-gi had such a grandiose view. But his companion on the plane did not share his opinion about the grandiose view. He believed that all these individuals were not up to the required level. He needed to see each of these people in person. He jumped straight from the plane, but there was no need to be afraid. Many of those who saw this were very shocked. Not everyone could land from such a height. This man truly inspired horror and fear. This man's name was Il-sung, and he was the best leader of the Taijin group. Many of those who were there recognized him immediately. He was a legendary authority among the bandit world. Il-sung decided to first express his gratitude to these people for daring to come to Mount Ilwal. Before we begin, he would like to explain just once what this warrior festival is. The purpose of the festival was to honor the greatest achievements of the late chairman Jin Young-yi. The last winner would inherit everything in the Taijin group. The festival consists of 4 acts. The 4th act was at the very top, and the first act began from the mountain. Mount Ilwal was the private land of the Taijin group. The rules were simple. When the gates were to open, all participants were required to enter the mountain. Anyone who came down from the mountain would be disqualified. The festival would be declared started when the sun went down and the signal rocket exploded. Before that, everyone could take a position that was advantageous to them. At the moment, more than 200 people have participated in this festival. The first stage will be considered completed when this number decreases to 20 participants. Swords, blunt weapons and so on were allowed as direct combat using all their skills. However, explosives, firearms, deadly poisons, electricity, and the like were strictly prohibited. Anyone who violated the festival format by using any of these would be executed on the spot. Il-sung hoped that there would be no one who would ruin the festival at the very beginning. All participants should keep in mind that all decisions would always be made by the organizers alone. In mid-sentence, an old man dared to interrupt him. He shouted that it was all nonsense, and it would be as he said. In the end, he wanted everyone to do what they wanted. This man believed that all 5 sons of Ji Yonyi were among the participants, and that the winner had already been determined from the very beginning. He claimed that it was all a game in which everything was rigged from the very beginning. Ko-un would not tolerate such impudence for so long and attacked him first. The old man certainly didn't expect such a turn of events. And then Il-seong himself approached him. He did not understand how such a pitiful insect could tarnish the honor of the late chairman Jin Young-yi. Il-seong shouted that there were no exceptions for anyone. This festival was exclusively for everyone, and everyone's share in this place would depend on themselves and the enemy that stood in their way. Only time will tell who the winner is. Kang Dae-oh thought that guy was a fool. He could have kept his opinion to himself. Il-sung emphasized once again that neither origin, nor family ties, nor status mattered. In this festival, everything would be decided exclusively by fists. Those who valued their lives had time to change their minds and leave. However, if all the participants have the desire to climb to the top of this world, if they have the balls, then it is worth trying to confidently rush to Taijin's throne. All the participants agreed with his words, which motivated them even more. In that case, if everyone was ready, the doors to the mountain could be officially opened. The first stage of the Warrior Festival has officially begun. Kang Dae-oh was preparing to conquer the peaks. He had been preparing for this for as long as he knew himself, and he was definitely not going to give up. Now he too will take the path to success. Bloodthirsty beast, there were a lot of snakes on this mountain, so that you could die not only from fists. For Kang Dae, it all seemed kind of boring. He was impatiently waiting for the real game to begin. He had already begun to die of hunger. Going to this festival, the guy thought that at least they would feed him before the start. Having caught this snake, Kang Dae-oh tried to figure out whether it was poisonous in order to eat at least its meat. While he was thinking about this, he didn't even notice that someone was watching him. At first, these people thought that he was out of his mind. On the mountain where there are a lot of dangerous guys, this guy walked as openly as his strength allowed him to. One of these people wondered if they could get rid of him that easily, but the other guy thought that they should leave him alone. It was not worth revealing their affection for some loser. They decided that at this point it was worth paying attention to a completely different person. Every cell in the bandit's body was tense. They decided that as soon as they announced the start, they would attack him. And literally behind their backs the alarm siren blared and they attacked. Their first victim will be him. But these guys didn't take into account that this man could be much stronger than the two of them, and his speed was simply excellent. The boys refused to believe that they were about to lose. It simply couldn't happen. Their opponent's reaction and speed was simply high, and the strikes are even faster and more accurate. This guy's strength was simply enormous. This man came to this place because he was told that this festival was where the biggest names in the shadows of South Korea gathered. But all he saw were weaklings putting in little effort. It would be easier than he thought. This guy could easily take over the top of Taejin. The guy he beat asked him to stop the fight because he had already won. But that was not all. Even greater torments lay ahead. This man was much stronger than he seemed. That's what he wanted. He wanted primal violence that had never been seen in competition before. He had money and fame, and he could even kill as much as he wanted. That's what this festival meant to him. The man even managed to notice Kang Dae-oh, who was silently standing in the shadows and watching all of this. He hoped that this young man thought so too. Cho Myung-hoon, a former national super middleweight boxing champion with 12 convictions for murder and violence, needed a buddy to enjoy the festival with. He offered the spot to Kang Dae-oh. Kang Dae-oh would never accept his offer after seeing what he did. He's a true beast. But if he wanted a fight, the main character was grateful to him. Kang Dae-oh decided to attack first. This battle should have at least somehow cheered him up. After all, not everyone gathered at this festival was as weak as it seemed at first glance. Cho Myung-hoon was quicker at one point, landing a few punches on the main character. His skill level in boxing was undeniable, but it was still not enough to defeat a big guy like Kang Dae-oh. Kang Dae-oh wasn't just a jock either. He knew a few tricks and could answer calmly with pride. His blow was much stronger than the boxer's own. At first, the main character didn't even realize that there was a boxer in front of him. He only now began to notice that his opponent's movements were very light. But the only thing Kang Dae-oh couldn't understand was why such an athlete would come to this festival. Did he really hope that it would be easy here? This level might really seem too easy to him. Cho Myung-hoon explained that the arena wasn't really that fun. His only interest was in stomping on all the bugs begging for mercy. Kang Dae-oh already realized that this athlete was definitely very talented. He recalled how his opponent had managed to use his fists in just a moment. The long-haired gangster, without even noticing how his stomach had curled inward, rushed to counterattack. And Kang Dae-oh's blocking hand even went numb at one point. From what he had already seen and felt, the main character could only assume that his opponent could bench press heavy or super heavy. But for now, one thing was clear: he was strong and fast. This guy was so desperate to beat up the other participants. There must be many dead people on the conscience of people who attack with faith only in their own strength. And you could definitely tell from this guy. The minimum time is 0.2 seconds, during which information received by the optic nerve reaches the brain and initiates movements. Among the countless fighting styles that exist on Earth, the fastest is the jab. Many fighters have completed their jab very quickly, but no one has ever managed to do it in 0 to 2 seconds. But Kang Dae-oh could. Only his jab could break through a person's body in 0.2 seconds. The opponent either did not have time to react to his fist and was completely eliminated, or he took a defensive stance, and then he just tries his best to stay in place. Kang Dae-oh decided to try to get into a stance himself and wait for a certain moment. But no matter how strong the defense, it always reaches its limit. The moment has come. Kang Dae-oh pretended that his defense had relaxed and waited for his opponent to run out of steam. Cho Myung-hoon realized this. But Kang Dae-oh even managed to come up with a new plan of attack. He threw the stone into the air and at the right moment hit his opponent with it, thereby knocking him off his feet. But he didn't want to stop there. And then there was a sporting interest. Cho Myung-hoon had to understand that there is no judge and no mercy among bandits. The foundation of boxing has always been to never take your eyes off your opponent's fists. Cho Myung-hoon was unwilling to give up and tried to continue the fight despite his wounds. Cho Myung-hoon's punch had exhausted all his remaining strength. He backed away from the jab's speed and swung back to hit the body, but he couldn't break through it in 0.2 seconds. The bone in his hand cracked and his body was burned with terrible pain, and a second later he was curled up on the ground and screaming in pain. Kang Dae-oh came closer and closer to him. The body was paralyzed with fear, and the only thing the enemy could say was that he asked to wait and not touch him. Cho Myung-hoon lost and did not want to continue the fight. He begged Kang Dae-oh not to touch him anymore. He called the referee for help and asked to stop the fight. He screamed for someone to stop this psychopath. But this was not a ring at all, and no one could help him here. There was no referee here to stop the fight, no coach to refuse the competition because his student was unable to continue the fight. In this criminal world, people have always been divided into predators and victims. In this world, one defeat meant instant death. But Kang Dae-oh was no one to administer justice. The rules of this festival obliged him to eliminate his rival by any means necessary. He dealt one last blow to his opponent. Kang Dae-oh didn't intend to kill him. He just wished him to stay home next time and hid his punching bag there as much as he wanted. This festival was no place for simpletons like Cho Myung-hoon. The main character believed that only those who were ready to step towards death had the right to come to the warrior festival. Mount Ilwal, operational headquarters of the Taejin Control Center. The knockout was found at Section 19. Former boxing champion Cho Myung-hoon. Choi Chul-gi ordered a cleanup team to be sent there immediately. Il-sung also watched all this. He realized that it was still too early to place his bets on the winner. But the youngest chairman decided to bet on the chairman's eldest son, one of the ogres. His name was Jin Kwon-myung, and 10 toads were bet on him. One of the chairmen still couldn't decide who he would bet on, so he decided to ask Il-sung. And then the head of Taejin Group, Yi-sung, decided to bet 10 carats on the second son, Jin Chang-ho. Taejin Group's second-in-command, Samson, decided that he would no longer bet on small fish and would ultimately refrain from betting. Choi Chul-gi didn't like such hobbies of his elders and preferred not to even listen to it. The price of each of these pure gold figurines is close to 300 million won, the same as the price of a Ferrari. It's as if they were betting a fortune, and the money was for school lunches. Sasong suddenly asked to show him that guy on the screen, Kang Dae-oh. There was almost no information about him, so it was impossible to find out anything more than his name. The only thing that was known about him was that in the past he was a gangster, and in the present he was an ordinary unemployed man. Choi Chulgi said that the late chairman Jin Young-yi personally invited him to the festival during his lifetime. The top managers were very surprised that such a simple person was found with whom the chairman himself had personal contact. The rest of the group were also shocked by this news. Sasong found this all a very, very interesting turn of events. Before that, he was in doubt and deciding who to place his bets on. Now a worthy candidate has appeared. Sasong has put all his money on this unemployed gangster. Was Sasong really taking the risk of getting carried away again? He should have spread his investments. He had already lost at least 300 lions. But Sasong was sure that the late Jin Young-yi left it to them as an unexpected and valuable gift. Then you need to start preparing to tear open the gift box. Kang Dae-oh had no idea that someone could appreciate his strength like that. Notice of prohibition of drinking. As a result of water quality testing, E. coli and large amounts of heavy metals were found. It was forbidden to drink from this mineral spring. But this sign hardly stopped anyone. It was Hwang Tae-seop, the boss of the organization in Busan. Before he beats up those people who are watching him, why don't they drink some of this wonderful water too? These people have clearly had their teeth in his teeth for a long time, and now they will not miss the opportunity to get even with him. Hwang Tae-seop didn't remember them very well, but he always remembered people who were uglier than him. He remained an impudent fool who knew no limits. Among them, the gangsters of Busan, it was customary for Hubeis to respect Sunbeis, and Sunbeis to be generous to Hubeis. They were all united by this romance and loyalty. But that was before Hwang Tae-seop came along. He led a gang without any kinship, and he disrupted the order in Busan by destroying the organization of his Sunbeis. Because of him, their entire organization collapsed in a matter of seconds. And now all these people have gathered in this place to take his head. Hwang Tae-seop had been prepared for this for a long time. He was just waiting for them to realize that this piece was beyond their capabilities. He was waiting for these Sunbeis to play enough. But it is unlikely that all these people will simply forget about their loss. They will return again, and Hwang Tae-seop understood this, so everything had to end here. The boss of the organization scattered almost everyone to the sides. Their fists flew around, tearing the air and leaving traces of hatred and malice on their bodies that had been accumulating for years. Hwang Tae-seop was bloodthirsty and cunning. He would never be able to retreat. Unexpectedly, another man, eager for an easy victory, joined their fight. This man also wanted to fight Hwang Tae-seop. He decided to use a baseball bat as his weapon. He knew that Hwang Tae-seop was number one in Busan, so it was no surprise that absolutely everyone wanted to fight him. The boss was truly magnificent. The rumors were true about his strength. Well, he also decided to introduce himself, the number one of the Daichin gang in Cheongnam, Namgi Chul. But the acquaintance with him passed rather quickly due to the fact that Kang Dae-oh finally decided to intervene in this duel. The main character threw his opponent at the feet of Hwang Tae-seop, and then Hwang Tae-seop got him out of his way. Now only the two of them remained in this clearing. And after Kang Dae-oh apologized to him that the boss had to wait for him for too long, Hwang Tae-seop was glad that this kid survived. And now he was burning with the desire to finish him off. This time no one would be able to stop them. Kang Dae-oh was also full of desire to deal with this bandit. This fight promised to be interesting. Okay, then I should have started by saying that Hwang Tae-seop wanted to see what this boy was really capable of, so he asked him to go first. Hwang Tae-seop was a real man from Busan, a real thug. It would be too cruel of him to treat this guy as an equal opponent, so he gave him a chance to strike first. Of course, Kang Dae-oh wouldn't refuse this opportunity. He only asked to give him 3 seconds. In just 3 seconds, he intended to trample this bandit and bury his face in the ground. This statement made the boss of the organization lose his temper, and from that moment the fight began. 3 seconds began to count too quickly. It was already 2:32. For Hwang Tae-seop, it even seemed for a moment that the earth had turned upside down. It was already 2:12. The time reached 1:42, 1:07, 0:52, 0:25. Kang Dae-oh was even able to cope a little faster. The count reached 0, and he still stood over the boss's body. His blow was too strong that it seemed incompatible with life. The operation began. Hwang Tae-seop even had time to think for a moment about why he actually came to this warrior festival. Memories past Busan Kyeosan Industrial High School. In high school, Sunbeis often bullied anyone who was weaker than them. They thought that all those guys were starting to forget themselves completely since they were getting good treatment. They dared to sit and talk in front of their Sunbeis. They often beat them all like dogs, and all because they wanted the boys to feel a sense of shame. These guys shouldn't be proud of themselves. You need to know your place at all times. And then the personality of Hwang Tae-seop himself began to emerge. That day, he turned to his sunbaes and asked them about something he still couldn't understand. He thought that the sunbaes had screwed up and were now just taking out all their anger on these guys. At that time, Hwang Tae-seop was still an ordinary first-year student who was a member of the judo club at Chulsan High School in Busan. One of the sunbaes even thought that he had simply misheard the words, but Hwang Tae-seop knew for sure that he was not mistaken. Instead of using this time to practice, the sunbaes were just lazing around, and that was why they lost. The other guys then tried to stop him, otherwise everyone knew that after such words he would get into trouble. One of the sunbaes couldn't take it anymore and swung at him. Even then, Hwang Tae-seop knew that wherever he went, everyone was the same. All around was a rabble that envied the talented and could only boast about their age. From that moment on, he swore that he would never let anyone hurt him. Having dealt with one sunbae, he then turned to all the others. Did everyone really think that being born put them first or much lower in status? If they all wanted politeness, then they had to earn it with their abilities. A couple of decades later, a close friend of Henim's was now sitting in his office with only one question. Their gang Paiktu was number 1 in all of Busan, and Hwang Tae-seop was the strongest in the city. So why does he risk his life and break into the warrior festival? It was simply impossible to answer this question without drinking. Many of his people were expecting reasonable explanations that day. Hwang Tae-seop was truly proud of being the best in Busan. However, he entered this festival to prove that he was the strongest not only in Busan, but in the whole country. He always thought about it. Hwang Tae-seop always wanted to make sure that he was really the strongest, and not a frog that was stuck in one well. He wanted to know if he could defeat all the named strongest of this country. But his people were worried that if he went there, he would not be able to return. Hwang Tae-seop knew that even if he died at this warrior festival, even that would not be able to stop him. He seemed interested in what, and if he had a chance to meet someone there who would make him use all his strength, then wouldn't this meeting be worth dying with dignity? And now, in front of him, stood the same warrior he had spoken of. Kang Dae-oh also noticed that the boss was quite strong and powerful. Hwang Tae-seop suddenly became curious to know the name of his opponent. Kang Dae-oh was a little surprised, but asked to listen to him carefully and then introduced himself. Hwang Tae-seop will remember this name for a long time. He decided to duck in front of his opponent and ask for his forgiveness. It was a request to forgive him for the disrespect he had shown, and he did it sincerely. Then, at their first meeting, Hwang Tae-seop was blinded by his vanity in the name of politeness. He trampled his pride like a man. And now he asked to forgive his rudeness and, in the end, to fight him again. After that, it would have been a sin not to accept his apology. Kang Dae-oh would have been willing to fight again anyway. The main character had long ago noticed that his jacket was really bothering him. It was time to take it off. Now he will definitely be able to respond to his opponent's sincerity as befits him. Kang Dae-oh made a clever move. He allowed his opponent to attack him first. Hwang Tae-seop was 190 centimeters tall and weighed 120 kilograms. At an early age, he conquered the youth sports festival in judo and became the champion of traditional wrestling in South Korea in the 140 kilograms weight category. His body was born for wrestling. In fact, it was hard to even imagine Hwang Tae-seop losing. Right now, their fight was being watched by a special team of performers under the direct command of Taejin Group chairman Ko Woong. It was really hard for Kildal to imagine any other outcome of this fight, but Cho Kui knew that this mysterious guy was definitely very strong if he could deal with Chae Soo-hyuk and Cho Myung-hoon. The guys were very interested in what the final of this fight would be. Kang Dae-oh and Hwang Tae-seop were still fighting each other, and this time the boss didn't spare his strength. Each time he struck harder and harder at different parts of the protagonist's body. But Kang Dae-oh also did not remain in debt and dealt no less powerful blows. They both gave it their all and were not willing to lose. At some point, Hwang Tae-seop gained the upper hand and put the main character on his shoulder blades. Kang Dae-oh wasn't that simple. He used a chokehold with his legs. But almost nothing came of it. The boss broke free from his grip and struck. Afterwards, Kang Dae-oh was able to see the golden bull. He couldn't understand what it meant, but he still had to continue the fight. It was a real warrior festival, but those whom Kang Dae-oh had met so far had only disappointed him. Hwang Tae-seop was the first warrior whom the boy could easily call a real warrior. Hwang Tae-seop could say the same about him. This is indeed the warrior who made him give his all. After his words, Kang Dae-oh kicked him. Kang Dae-oh didn't know yet what a perfect victory could mean. In any fight, there was always a winner and a loser. The loser usually had regrets. The main character thought about whether he could have avoided all of this and used his technique earlier. However, if the loser has such regrets, then the victory cannot be perfect. Strength, speed, technique, strategy, no matter how much the loser tries to squeeze them out of his head, even if the loser can use all the experience he has, when he cannot imagine himself winning under any circumstances. Huang Taisiop didn't understand where such a center of gravity came from. He couldn't move from the spot. But it was worth trying. Who would he become if he couldn't even try? When the loser is not left with even a shred of regret, not even 1%. And then the true winner inflicts a crushing defeat. It is precisely this conviction of the enemy by force that is the aesthetics of victory. Kang Dae-oh won but did not kill his opponent. He remembered his name and hoped that they would meet again someday. It had been a long time since the festival had started. It was already late at night. By this time, many participants had already dropped out. A level B crime was committed, Masan water splash. The treatment was considered complete. It was a true warrior festival, attended by some of the country's most dangerous criminals. Gangsters, murderers, even the most powerful prisoners, even those who were hard to punish under the law. There were even members of the Taijin group among the participants. Tonight was going to be a bloody night. Yi Gun-woo was the leader of the Special Police Unit OWL Team, codename Alpha. Cleanup. Meanwhile, a special team of executioners, under the direct command of Chairman Ko-un, had already approached Huang Taisub's body. Cho Kui never thought that he would lose so miserably. Kildal reported to the operational headquarters that in Sector 12 there was the body of Huang Taisub, the boss of the organization in Busan. The boss wasn't that weak when he got to his feet. Kildal cancelled his call and hung up. Huang Taisub had a resilience that was beyond what was possible for an ordinary person. In that case, Cho Kui decided to ask if he could still continue this battle further. There was no point in fussing, just because he closed his eyes for a second. No one would stop him from continuing. And after his words, Chairman Ko-un's team left the place, leaving him alone. Huang Taisub considered admitting defeat. Tears streamed down his cheeks, and his body succumbed to the gravity of the earth. Still, he was not yet ready to accept his defeat. They would still meet Kang Dae-oh. In parallel Plan Alpha, the entire team has successfully arrived at its destination. And Kong-woo tried to contact the plane's pilot. Hawk was on the line. The plane was already approaching the target location. It was going to return after dropping supplies. A few minutes later, the shipment was successfully dropped. Delta and Epsilon were informed that the gift had arrived. The others were ordered to move to their locations and monitor the area. Movement had to be extremely stealthy. In case of emergency, each team member was allowed to open fire. This was an operation in the name of reprisal against all criminals. They must all pay for their actions. His team did not wait for a second invitation. They knew their job very well and would not let their leader down. Meanwhile, Kang Dae-oh decided to relieve himself. He didn't like that no one had thought of putting a toilet on this mountain. He was too old to do his big business in the open. Still, it wouldn't be a good idea to get stabbed while he was doing his business. He felt like someone was about to attack him. The office of the Chief of Police. The Owl Group was a special unit that was not to be revealed to the outside world. A place where criminals from all over the country gather, the Warrior Festival. There is no better place for Owl to conduct his activities. Geum-gi Hyuk is the leader of the Incheon City Crime Task Force. But this was completely contrary to the order of the General Commissioner. However, for the sake of national security, it was imperative that this plan be carried out. Hwang Byung-gap is a commissioner and head of the Investigative Committee of South Korea. The head of the task force asked the commissioner not to worry. The owl at this festival will completely eradicate all this garbage from society. The gift was a bomb that exploded in just the right place, and now several bandits could no longer see anything. This was the official start of Team Owl's operations. The Owl Group was formed from people selected after the most brutal training. This group included 5 elite fighters from the Anti-Crime Task Force. The strength of each such person was equal to the strength of one national group, and among them was the leader Yi Gun-woo, codenamed Alpha. Who would have thought that Koo Gang-chul would also decide to participate in this festival just to meet the leader in person? Koo Gang-chul is a sword master, a killer from Seong Shim Taijin's group. The fight between these warriors must have been spectacular. He didn't manage to make a good impression on himself during his first attack. Alpha was very strong, and his speed exceeded many of the participants gathered here. But Yi Gun-woo decided not to play around and dealt with him right away. Alpha had a different level of strength that most people couldn't handle. The surveillance cameras at Section E7 stopped working and the connection was interrupted. An unidentified helicopter was approaching Mount Ilval. Choi Chul-gi didn't expect the police to stand by and watch the festival, but they still interfered so openly. It was clearly a declaration of war. Choi Chul-gi immediately ordered Chairman Ko-eun's team to eliminate all violators, but Il-sun was against it and firmly said no. His anger knew no bounds now. He would deal with all the violators himself. Hawk reported to Delta that he had arrived at the target location. The dropped ordnance and firearms were successfully tested. The weapons supply to Team Al has been successfully completed. As planned, everything quickly exploded. Suddenly, a third-party helicopter appeared on the radar. There was a huge chain hanging from this helicopter. Flying closer, the Hawk noticed that there was a man hanging on it. It was an attack. The Hawk did not have time to report that he was captured. And now the helicopter was falling. But even without that, the SOVA team saw the explosion several dozen meters from their location. The helicopter was shot down. Il-sung was very strong, and his strength should not be underestimated. On board this helicopter, the Hawk was able to survive, and now he did not understand how it was possible to manually shoot down an entire helicopter. For Il-sun, this was just a warm-up, and at this point he decided that it was not worth stopping. The helicopter had to be completely destroyed. The Hawk was scared, no matter how light this helicopter was, but this technology and the strength of a man, even such a huge one, could not overcome him. Raising it seemed impossible, but not for the best of Taejin Group's leaders. It took a lot of effort for Il-sun to flip this helicopter. The members of the group who witnessed this happen were more than just shocked. They recognized one of the closest people to the late Jin Young-yi. Anyone who desecrated the Sacred Warrior Festival will be executed here and now at the hands of Il-seong. Philosophy of fist-fighting. Il-seong was full of strength like never before. Everyone on Team Al knew him, but they couldn't imagine that there was so much power in one person. Il-sung saw that these people would not back down so easily, so he decided not to spare them. The group members definitely decided to take advantage of this chance and kill him. The team members stopped seeing him for a second, but still decided to continue shooting. They thought they had him trapped. But, unexpectedly, the chain wrapped around the neck of one of the team members, and in a matter of seconds Il-sung pulled hard towards himself. For this man, everything was over even then. After finishing with it, Il-sung threw it away like a useless thing right at the feet of his comrades. It was a diversionary tactic to attack the others. This time Epsilon was wrong. He could no longer fight such a strong man. At the moment of his escape, he received a severe injury to his arm. He only managed to say one word, leader. Meanwhile, Gamma reported to the leader that Il-seong had been confirmed to have appeared on the opposite side of the mountain. Delta had died in the battle with him, and Epsilon had been seriously injured. The leader changed the plan in the mission. Now it was important to help Epsilon. But Gamma was wary because their opponent is the strongest person in the Taejin group. Will they be able to win? The leader knew they had to defeat him. Meanwhile, a gang of festival participants was approaching Epsilon. Things were very bad. He had lost too much blood, and his eyes were starting to go dark. The bandit leader was glad that he had come across such a victim. But he didn't have long left. The leader killed him. And then within seconds he killed the rest of the gang. Epsilon was able to wait for his leader. He was already on his last breath. Alpha came closer and hugged him. Alpha asked Epsilon not to say anything more, since he had already lost a lot of blood. Instead of words, Epsilon gave him his weapon. He felt that it was already over for him, and so now he asked his leader to finish the mission. Team Owl member Epsilon had done his job well. He could really leave the rest to his leader. For the last time, Alpha hugged him and asked him to have a good rest. Epsilon died. It was a huge loss for Alpha. When it was all over, Alpha asked the rat to come out of the shadows. He knew that someone had been watching them for a long time. It was Kang Dae-oh. Kang Dae-oh was angry that when he was relieving himself, they immediately put a knife to his throat. Where did they learn that? It was outrageous. The last of the Owl Group's men apologized to their leader and died. If these people were police officers, Kang Dae-oh was speechless. Would they really waste citizens' taxes to go to such a place? But it seemed that Alpha didn't listen to him at all. And then the main character decided to throw the body of his man right at his feet. He asked them to take everything and get out. If they really were police officers, Kang Dae-oh could guess why they would interfere in the gangster world. But they didn't belong here. If they valued their lives, they had to get out as quickly as possible. And finally Alpha spoke. He asked to stop simply talking. Alpha didn't understand how some scum of society dared to order them around. In that case, Kang Dae-oh decided not to give him a chance to leave peacefully anymore. In the attack, Alpha decided to use a bait knife and a gun that Epsilon gave him, but Kang Dae-oh himself suddenly disappeared somewhere. Seeing the gun, the main character was surprised that someone could bring this weapon to the festival. This meant only one thing. The police had planned to kill everyone from the very beginning. But such a weapon could not be drawn in a fist fight between two men. In this case, Alpha put his life on the line. But even understanding this, Alpha had no intention of removing him. Kang Dai-o managed to get to him too quickly to knock the gun out of his hands. This was not all the weapons Alpha had in his arsenal, but the main N=sign hero was not that weak either. Their fight promised to be serious, but there would be only one winner. And at that moment the knife flashed in the policeman's hand again, and then the gun appeared in his hand again. Finally, Alpha decided to turn to the criminal. He said that this night, on this mountain, it was up to him to decide whether the dregs of society would live or not. Kang Dai-o believed that Alpha was much more vile than the bandits he so passionately wanted to destroy. But did he really expect Kang Dai-o to die so meekly? The bullet whistled a couple of centimeters from Kang Dai-o's face. The main character was able to dodge successfully. Alpha couldn't stop there. The fight gradually turned into hand-to-hand combat. Alpha's pistol had only 4 bullets left, the last of his comrades. And Gun-woo couldn't waste any more shots on the unknown bandit. Before he ran out of bullets, he still had to face the bloodthirsty monster Il-sung. Suddenly, Alpha heard some rustling near him and finally took aim to shoot. A second later, he shot at some bandit in front of him. It was the same bandit he had already killed. Alpha realized that his real enemy was then behind him. Kang Dai-o didn't like that this impudent policeman had a habit of shooting at everything in sight. He had no right to consider himself an executioner. The protagonist couldn't understand how such a person could simply waste his pretty face. O could easily become everyone's favorite or an idol, but instead, for some reason, he chose such a bloody and dangerous job. He could have chosen something completely different, but he chose to be a policeman. And Gong-woo. In the past and to this day, he was often asked why he decided to become a police officer. When he was still a child, his father was killed by some gangster during an investigation. And since then, surrounded by kindness and love from his father's close people, the boy was still left alone in this evil and cruel world. Then he had no one left. He promised himself back then that he would become like his father in order to eradicate all evil. Alpha himself had often thought about how he could change his life and not live surrounded by hatred, but he could not betray that little boy who had promised to avenge his father. And now in the face of an enemy and a criminal, he could not surrender like that. Gathering his strength, Alpha struck his opponent in order to be able to reach his pistol. But Kang Dai-o had him in a chokehold. He couldn't let that policeman kill him or anyone else. He grabbed Yi Gun-woo so hard that he shot several times into the air in an attempt to free himself from the strong grip. And finally, Alpha realized that it was very presumptuous to underestimate an opponent of such a level as this guy. He had only one thing left to do. He was ready to risk absolutely everything, but it was his duty to punish this trash. The stab wound to Kang Dai-o's leg caused him great pain, but that didn't stop him from trying to take the gun away. And Gun-woo believed that at this moment, under this sky, he alone was the true justice. He lived with this hatred all his life and hated every criminal in this country. Their fight was still going on when both of them could no longer do anything. Just as Kang Dai-o was about to deliver the finishing blow, he suddenly felt another pain piercing through his entire body. A bullet hit his body, but it wasn't Alpha who fired. Gamma came to the aid of his leader. He fired and was only able to hit the shoulder. It was not so fatal, but noticeably weakened the enemy. Alpha ordered to shoot until he killed him, but from such a distance he could kill his leader. Gamma believed that it was necessary to evacuate immediately. In such a state, he could not continue the mission. But he had to do what he was told. Alpha wouldn't be able to rest until he finished off all the trash on this mountain. Kang Dai-o understood that this psychopath had killed and would continue to kill all of his subordinates. But Alpha believed until the very end that in the fight against evil and crime in this world, there was no such thing as ethics and human morality. After his words, Alpha blew them both up with a grenade. But fortunately, almost none of them were hurt. Kang Dai-o escaped with only light scratches. It was just a distraction that allowed Yi Gun-woo to get his opponent in a chokehold. Alpha pressed on his throat with all his might, all the while screaming that he wanted him dead more than anything. But he didn't calculate that his strength wouldn't be enough to twist such a powerful neck as Kang Dai-o's. Mired in his own hatred, Police Officer Alpha failed to notice the obvious. He didn't realize in time that the main character had already freed himself from the chokehold long ago. But there was something else. Did this policeman really think that this kind of hold could successfully work underwater, especially against someone who was physically stronger than him? Surface tension. Molecules of a liquid such as water attract each other and form one side. When any object collides with the surface of this same liquid, depending on the speed, distance, and area, it will still receive a blow. If a person falls at high speed and collides with this surface, he will receive a blow that will be comparable to hitting concrete. For Alpha, it was all over at this point. The main leaders of Taijin Group are the 4 sons. 5 sons of Jin Yan Yi, 5 Go. In short, there is still a lot of evil left. There was still a lot of evil left that Yi Gunwoo had to deal with, he promised. Kang Dae-oh was indeed and possibly a villain, so let anyone who wants to come after him at any time, but without such strange toys as guns and knives. Il-sung was already standing behind Kang Dae-oh. Since the guy had done all his work for him, he thought that the old man should treat him to a cold beer. But instead of answering, Il-sung demanded that the boy stop being rude to him and give him back the abomination that he was holding in his hand. But Kang Dae-oh's mood allowed him to play around a little longer. He pointed that gun right at Il-sung, but did he know who was really standing in front of him? Kang Dae-oh refused to give up the gun voluntarily. The main character just wanted such a big guy to try and take the gun away from him himself. Resistance is pointless. Kang Dae-oh pointed his gun at Il-sung and asked if he really wanted to take the toy away from him. If he really wanted to take possession of her, he had to catch her. The main character decided to swing with all his might and threw. Il-sung had no problem catching the gun in midair, no matter how hard it was thrown. It was just a diversionary tactic Kang Dae-oh struck with astonishing speed. But the main character had no idea that the rest of the group that accompanied Il-sung were already running behind him to help. They wanted to kill him for such disrespect for his elders. Ko Woong's team wanted to expel him from the first level of the festival. Before he could finish his sentence, Kang Dae-oh ordered them to shut up. Firearms and explosives were strictly prohibited. These were the established rules of the festival, so the main character did not really understand why he suffered from all this. Kang Dae-oh turned their gaze to the fact that the perpetrators were openly committing riots and shooting at people from all sides. And even he was able to be hit by a bullet, but he almost said hello to his dead relatives. Due to everyone's incompetence, Kang Dae-oh almost missed his own path to success. And at the end of his tirade, the main character demanded that everyone, without exception, bow their heads before him. Il-sung was even speechless for a second. In the end, he did not take these words seriously and concluded that the weapons were taken away and the violators were punished so that the task was accomplished. Il-sung informed Ko Woong that he was about to leave. But it wasn't that easy to leave. Kang Dae-oh wouldn't let him go. He told everyone to bow their heads. And after Il-sung looked at him, the main character finally got angry. He didn't like such looks that showed that the person considered himself above everyone around. Was this whole elite really used to always looking down on them? In that case, Kang Dae-oh was going to crush his opponent here and now. He still hoped that Il-sung would bow his arrogant head to him. Cho Kui was puzzled. He thought that this guy was crazy and did not fully understand what he was saying and who was standing in front of him. Looking into the eyes of this young man, Il-sung noticed that he was standing right in front of him, acting very firmly, without trembling at all. He had a very high level of self-confidence without a single shred of doubt. Kang Dae-oh always had the utmost impudence to look down on everyone. He is a loner who has walked his own path in life. For Il-sung, this realization was the most interesting. For some reason, this country bumpkin had a very strong aura about him. Several decades ago. Korean War, immediately after the armistice, Mount Ilwal, temporary U.S. military camp. Post-war U.S.-Korea partnership, a fight was brewing in the square that day. But this fight did not last long. The sparring was over in literally 5 minutes, and the referee's whistle sounded. The winner was Staff Sergeant Simpson, an undefeated legend throughout Texas. It was the United States' 19th win out of 19 games. The Korean team's complete defeat seemed obvious from the start. Many people were rooting for Korea that day, and when they lost, one of the fans, Mr. Kim, was very upset. After all, these were just frivolous, friendly matches to boost the morale of the soldiers. As an allied nation, they had done all they could. Then it would be right to stop all this. The US has always respected South Korea, but in reality it understood that it had no more talent. And suddenly after these words, one of the soldiers received a powerful blow and flew back several meters. And later, someone from the suddenly appeared fog turned to these overseas Korean friends. It seemed that the Koreans themselves were impatient in their actions. It would be uninteresting if it all just ended like that. After all, there is still one Trump player left. He was very eager to fight. It was Jin Young Yi. At that time, he was the same unemployed 32-year-old slacker as Kang Dae-oh. All the soldiers on the US side were shocked by the sudden appearance of a new enemy. Tyrone King is a captain in the 1st Marine Division of the United States Marine Corps. In the present day, he is Taijin Il-sung. Jin Yongyi was impressed by his physique and hoped that his opponent would be the same in battle. That day, his late friend told him the same words as Kang Dae-oh. Young Jin Yongyi never liked being looked down upon. He wanted to see his opponent show respect by looking him straight in the eye. This phrase, as in the present tense, really irritated him. And then a fight started between them. And now, many years later, Il-sung met a person just like his friend. At the moment when Kang Dae-oh and Il-sung's fists touched, Il-sung instinctively avoided the physical struggle. But the protagonist knew that this time he had an extremely powerful opponent. Ko-un, seeing Il-sung smile in this fight, immediately rushed to report this to his senior. But from the moment Il-sung made the decision to fight, no one else had the right to interfere with it. Il-sung was truly amazed that such a young and confident guy did not retreat before the strongest and most respected person. It was very commendable, but Kang Dae-oh himself did not think about all this. He was confused by the slightly strange tactics of the enemy. He had chains as a weapon. This chain moved as if it were alive. In that case, Kang Dae-oh needed to quickly come up with a new attack tactic. It was not worth turning your back to the enemy. A second later, a chain dug into your back. The chain's trajectory changed very quickly, and it was not always possible to escape from it. And in that moment, Kang Dae-oh realized that he couldn't dodge any longer. The speed of the attack was so powerful that he couldn't tell from which side he was being attacked. The chain's movements were impossible to predict, but he couldn't give up either. After all, even if he somehow managed to dodge the blow, he would immediately fall under the next one. And the answer to his question came by itself. It was a real salvation. Kang Dae-oh decided to go into the forest, where his opponent would definitely not be able to swing the chain. The chain's weakness was always in the obstacles. This is a standard strategy that will work 100% because there really was a dense forest around, but if you mindlessly swing your weapon, it will get stuck in the trees. However, this is a huge problem for the weak, but not for Il-sung. Kang Dae-oh saw with his own eyes that his opponent's blows could break even the strong bark of any tree. This meant that it was impossible to evade. And resistance itself was impossible. It seemed that Il-sung's victory was already in his hands. Kang Dae-oh was almost certain that he couldn't dodge any further, and there was no longer any place to hide. There was only one way out. Even though the movements were chaotic, one way or another, there was only one run left right before the collision. The main character pushed the chain away with one blow. This move surprised Il-sung. No one had ever managed to push his chain away. Naturally, a failed chain of attack can easily return to the hands of its owner. There was one more thing that needed to be done immediately. Kang Dae-oh found a weak spot in this chain and decided to strike at it. This was an opportunity for a perfect counterattack. Il-sung was surprised that his opponent had found the damaged part of the chain so easily due to poor welding. Kang Dae-oh actually managed to see and aim in just 1 second, but the blow that followed was certainly unexpected. The protagonist was very angry that such a powerful man, having become old, began to depend heavily on all sorts of tools. He must show the current generation what a blow should really be. The special team of enforcers directly reporting to Chairman Ko-un were excited and very worried about their senior. Il-seong agreed to fight with his fists. It had been a long time since anyone had waved their hands in front of him. Il-sung felt it necessary to thank the boy for the joy he had given him. He asked the name of his opponent. The protagonist noted that the old man looked very good. He asked to remember his name. Kang Dae-oh hoped to become the pinnacle of this world and bring everyone down. Il-sung will remember this name forever. Il-sung also introduced himself. He reminded that he was the host of the first stage of this warrior festival. Since Kang Dae-oh was able to overcome him, the elder decided to give him the opportunity to immediately enter the second stage of this festival. This was exactly what the main character wanted most of all, but it was worth achieving according to all the rules. Taijin's command center operations room. Choi Chul-gi saw that the elder Il-seong had started an unplanned fight and no one was able to intervene and stop it. Sa-song, more than anyone else, knew that this was always in the spirit of their sweet troublemaker. Memories, participation in countless battles, the endless dark life of Tyrone, repeating all this carnage for the sake of victories. Before him a noble, brightly shining ray of light appeared. The struggle for existence, rarely could one encounter such a majestic value. But Jin Young-yi was going to fight for his dream of the beyond. For him, this fight was real, to take the whole world into his hands. Then he invited Il-seong to join him. This beam of light was so strong that it was able to set Tyrone's heart on fire. Now, Il-sung wished that Kang Dae-oh would show him the same thing. Before Kang Dae-oh knew it, he had achieved the massive look he had been striving for his entire life. Tyrone knew that this was the warrior, the new sun that would rise at the dawn of Taijin. Kildal was very worried about his elder when he saw that he was allowing himself to be hit quite hard. And suddenly, Kildal realized that a new, undefined feeling had arisen in his chest. It was not worry for the safety of his elder. He vowed to throw away his life for Taijin's sake. Now I suddenly felt like I was rooting for Kang Dae-oh. Elder Il-sung was always considered the first one on the way to the top. And his opponent had a very strong spirit, not only in that he fought back without a single hesitation. Kang Dae-oh possessed the purest fighting spirit, which may have influenced Il-sung himself. The flesh of both of them was torn in places and their bones were broken. But even in spite of this, no one was going to give up. Not even their spirit, but their honor will never be the first to retreat. Victory never comes to those who give up so easily. This was called the true way of a warrior. It was excellent in the eyes of both of them. They would fight to the very end, even if they had to die. But it was definitely not destined to come to this. Their fight should have ended with the timely intervention of the elder Sa-sun. He ordered them to stop and informed them that they had played enough. This fight should not have continued any longer. Everyone who heard these words was horrified. If they continue, Sa-sun will have no choice but to take the lives of both of them. Il-seong didn't understand why Hyun-nam was interfering in his fight. But enough was enough. Was Tyrone really going to rage like a fool for a long time? He shouldn't forget his duties. Sa-seong reminded him in time that he was the main leader. Il-sun felt very ashamed from these words. He forgot himself for just a second, and now he got this result. But unexpectedly, Cho Kwei stood up for him, asking not to blame his elder for what happened. He said that they had not taken any action against the rule violator up until now. And afterwards they simply watched indifferently the participant who had shown such rudeness. It was their team's mistake. But all this would be just a futile noise. Il-sung had decided everything, and it was simply unrealistic to stop him. Moreover, Sa-sung knew who was really to blame for all of this. The culprit was this reckless guy, whose strength was simply incredible. The protagonist almost died from Sa-sun's attack, and risked comparing him to a lion. Sa-sung, hearing this, even apologized to the boy and said that he was already old and it was difficult for him to control his strength. The elder saw that even after such a powerful blow, this guy immediately stood up straight. Sa-sung thought that this participant's performance was extremely impressive, and all those who violated the rules would be punished. Sa-sung promised that Il-sung would be issued a complaint in response to his injustice. The one responsible for the mistakes in running the organization, the boss on the organizer's side, Sa-sung, it's time to introduce himself, and he decided to give Kang Dae-oh a special rule to advance to the second round of this festival. Automatically advancing to the second round of this festival was an exceptional reward. However, there was no one who would oppose any decision made by the elder Sa-sung. Everyone understood Kang Dae-oh's strength. But the main character is still the one who is able to resist the will of anyone standing there. He refused this decision. He firmly knew that he did not need it. And then Sa-sung thought that this just wasn't enough for him. He could offer more. But no, this is just not what the protagonist would want. Kang Dae-oh grew up without this. He refused when someone gave him something for free. Sa-sung knew that free food was great, but free alcohol was even better. The main character, although he was a slacker, would not beg for anything. Victory was the only thing he wanted to achieve with his own fists. Kang Dae-oh couldn't ignore Il-sung. He noted that he fought very well and was the best opponent in all this time, but Il-sung only replied that Kang Dae-oh had not yet had time to receive a proper education. Sa-sung agreed with him. After all, since ancient times, the right of the winner is not granted, but squeezed out. Sa-sung knew that this guy had all the strength and knowledge to easily pass the first stage just by using his skills. And when this happens, they will all be able to meet again. Meanwhile, the helicopter had already taken off into the air. Since all the riots were over, Sa-sung believed that it was not his comrade's mistake at all. It was reckless towards the participants. Even more, it was an immense disgrace. Il-sung was truly ashamed of his actions. He was ready to accept any punishment. But then the time ran out and the comedy came to an end. In fact, it was all frivolous. Sa-sung found Kang Dae-oh to be very interesting and skillful. Surely they were all now convinced that this was the candidate who was worthy of the late chairman's personal invitation. What Cheol-gi had said was not a lie. Sa-sung was sorry that he would still be the winner of the bet. As expected, he was too perceptive, so he went all in. But in reality, Kenim only trusted the opinion of the late chairman. It was still worth asking Il-sung's opinion about this boy. Past, the duel on Mount Ilval, where Tyrone first met the chairman. His comrades could not accept the outcome. However, at that time the chairman did not intend to tolerate all this. As if he had been waiting for this moment, in that moment he laid them all down. Status, position, rank, whatever it was, the burdensome things he carried with him, he seemed to be indifferent to. He easily and freely defeated any warrior in battle. Ilsong met the one who fights for this one reason again on the battlefield today. Today, on Mount Ilval, he felt like he had returned to the past. It was only a fight between a warrior and a warrior. Wasn't that why Ilsong decided to hold this first stage on Mount Ilwal? Sasong envied him. Tyrone was the first to open this gift left by the chairman. But Ilsong still wanted to ask his opinion. Ilsong was very curious about how Sasung thought this Kang Dai-O was capable of reaching the top. But Sasong, without even thinking, answered that no. He thought that Kang Dai-O was still far from all this. What he has shown so far is outstanding strength and courage. However, his patience and influence were still unknown. But traditionally, to achieve complete success, a person had to go through a very long and difficult path. Perfection requires time and effort. If this imperfection further crosses the impossible line at the Warrior Festival, if in the end he can overcome his limits, this guy can become ideal. A vessel named Vertex into which he will be able to contain the entire world. On the other side of Mount Ilval, the time has come. The young gentleman asked if it had become too noisy on Mount Ilval. A small conflict arose between the police who had invaded without permission and the organizers. However, the elder Ilsong was able to suppress the entire escalating conflict. It looked like this old man had finally finished his warm-up. The gentleman had just been watching from behind. It looked like this old man was so eager to start this fight. In that case, the young master also wanted to enjoy this festival. Sasong knew that if Kang Dai-O was so desperate to win, he would have to overcome very strong opponents. That would be the path to the top. Jin Young Yi's strongest relatives, related by blood to Mr. Jin Young Yi's family, the youngest of the chairman's 5 sons, Jin Hak-jun.